So, having covered the tank building nations of World War One, it's now time to cover the nations that used World War One tanks but didn't necessarily build their own, these being Sweden, Japan, and China, with Sweden being covered in this episode. So, Sweden was officially neutral during World War One, not getting involved in the fighting on either side. Though it did let the Germans use its telegraph cabling facilities to pass important messages on, including one where the Germans proposed to secretly sink neutral Argentinian ships, which is a bit of an odd thing to suggest, and it is a bit weird that Germany got caught out twice plotting to secretly attack the Americas via intercepted telegraph cables. But Sweden's first exposure to tanks was via the Swedish military attaché being shown a captured British Mark IV heavy tank in Berlin, which spurred a desire to obtain tanks for Swedish use. But the British heavy tanks were unsuitable for Swedish requirements, and the lighter Whippet tank was too expensive. So Sweden instead looked to France, where they obtained a single Renault FT-17 armed with a 37mm gun, and this was tested from July 1921. But even the FT-17 was still too expensive to buy more examples of, so Sweden instead looked to Germany. Now, this might seem like a bit of an odd decision because, of course, Germany didn't really build that many tanks during World War One, and of course, in the Treaty of Versailles, Germany was forbidden from owning tanks. However, one of the German designs of World War One, the Leichtkampfwagen II, or LK2, while not fully produced and assembled ready to be used, the Germans had produced the necessary parts, they just had to be assembled. And so, after the war, Germany sold these to various nations, such as Hungary and, in this case, Sweden, who obtained 10 of these LK2s from Germany for the same price as about 3 or 4 French Renault FT-17s. So these were shipped to Sweden, who assembled them, and it was named the Stridsvagn M1921 in Swedish service, and these were used from 1922. So the M1921 isn't exactly the most heavily armed tank in the world, only being armed with machine guns. One of these was in the turret in a ball mount, although unfortunately the turret is manually traversed via muscle power, so won't traverse particularly fast, and one of these was in the hull by the driver, although at least 2 more machine guns could be fitted within the tank in various mountings. The armour wasn't the worst in the world, about 12 to 14mm, but it does use rivets, which in theory does make it a bit more vulnerable to enemy fire. And it was decently fast, having a Daimler-Benz 55 horsepower engine giving a top speed of 10 miles per hour or 16 kilometers an hour. And it also had a crew of, well, technically 2 to 4, because you needed 2 at a minimum, the driver in the hull and a gunner in the turret, but officially you could carry at least 2 more men, making the total crew 4, because like I said earlier, you could mount various machine guns in different mountings within the tank. So it carried about 2 to 4 crew depending on the amount of weaponry being carried. Now, of course, the M1921, being a machine gun armed only tank, would be a 0.0 tank, but it would be a decent tank. You know, it's decently fast, it's got decent armour, and the machine guns can be useful when armed with armour-piercing bullets, but of course would struggle a little bit against higher tier tanks. Of course, Sweden did recognise that they probably weren't the best tanks in the world, although they were a good starting point, and so they decided to upgrade 5 of these tanks in 1929, this becoming the Stridsvagn M21-29. And these were now armed with a 37mm gun capable of firing HE shells. Initially, one of these was armed with the 37mm gun from the FT-17, but the rest were armed with Skoda 37mm guns. But unfortunately, there's no photos of the M21-29 with these 37mm guns, so it's a little bit unknown what guns they were using exactly, other than that they were Skoda 37mm guns. Possibly the Infantry Scout M15, which was basically a trench gun along the same lines as the French 37mm gun. And so it's not going to have the best muzzle velocity in the world, and so it's probably not going to be massively useful against enemy tanks, though in theory it should be a little bit more useful than the machine guns. It was also fitted with a new Scania Vabis 85 horsepower engine, giving a new top speed of 11 miles per hour or 16 kilometers an hour. So 1 mile per hour or 2 kilometers an hour better than the M1921. And other than that, there wasn't too many other changes, and these were kept around at least until the late 1930s, although they would never actually see any combat in Swedish service. And so, yeah, that is basically all of the Swedish tanks of World War One. Like I said at the beginning, Sweden didn't produce its own tanks domestically, at least not until the interwar period. But the FT-17 would be a decent light tank for the Swedes, and the M1921 and 2129 would also be decent starter tanks for Sweden and would allow it to be represented in the World War One period. And I'd also be interested to hear your comments about these tanks, whether you're looking forward to them or any other suggestions for Swedish World War I tanks I might have missed. I look forward to reading your comments below. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed the episode, hopefully you'll join me for the next one. I've been Terreno, and I'll see you next time.